Oh, hello there. Yes, well, that was a wet one yesterday, wasn't it? Yes, hopefully today I'll be able to get out, because I just didn't fancy it yesterday. Just going out for sake of it. Not in the rain. Definition of stupidity, standing in the rain. Anyway, today I want to talk about imagined pasts. Once again about history, because a lot of people out there do like to use imagined pasts for themselves, usually for nefarious means, yes. People like Tommy Robinson, who are given intellectual cover, if I can possibly use those words in the same sentence. Anyway, yeah, posting up a few days ago David Starkey, who is there specifically these days simply to provide a cover for people's nasty opinions. Broadly speaking, a man who's got in trouble about racism in the past, but oddly is a favourite of racists. Go figure. And to smile yesterday, oh dear God, PragerU have decided to address the thorny problem of Adolf Hitler. Was he far right or far left? And unfortunately, I do have the feeling that various people in my comments will point a lot to this particular video where Dennis, sitting in a leather armchair by a fire, so you can tell he must be true, because people that sit in leather armchairs are very deeply intellectual. Look at Carl Benjamin. They always tell you the truth. Yes. Anyway, Dennis, link down below. Please do have a look for yourself. Does manage to basically invert any notions that you might have of political science completely on their heads to try and make a point, because we all know that Adolf Hitler was quite uniquely horrible in history, and as such has a bad reputation. So if you come out with stuff that looks broadly in support of the kind of things that Adolf Hitler would have liked, you're kind of guilty by association. So what you do is you neatly sidestep it and say, no, 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 actually he was a Maoist or something similar, and that way you've got your get out of jail free card. And talking of completely bastardising any notion of history, we have everyone's least favourite cosplay vicar, Friar Calvin Robinson, who presumably is still in exile in Ireland. But anyway, had the audacity to post this up. Muhammad, if he ever existed, is reported to have believed he was visited by demons. You can have a look for this at this yourself, but I do like the if he ever existed, because of course he is a very well documented historical figure. He definitely did exist, in a way that other prophets are, let's say, a bit dubious, because certain people only basically crop up in the Bible, don't they? Friar Calvin Robinson. Yes, but I do think that that's a fascinating view. Somebody that believes in invisible sky people is going to put down about about the nature of reality. No, it always makes me smile. Anyway, which brings us on to the nub of the matter, if you like, because one of the problems with British history is most people don't study history past the age of 14. It's not mandatory in the national curriculum, and the stuff that you get when you're younger is pretty patchy. And by pretty patchy, I mean it tries to cover stuff, but it can only do so on a very, very superficial level, because history is messy, isn't it? Yeah, history is just downright full of nooks and crannies. It's not a smooth glide into the future, even though it's often presented that way. So what we tend to get in schools is a very bastardized version and sanitized version of history. There are certain people who are very, very, very good, and there are other people who are very, very, very bad. For example, anybody that resisted exploitation but did so through violence means is very, very bad. But anyone who resisted exploitation through, well, if we squint and pretend a bit, through non-violent means like Gandhi and MLK and Nelson Mandela, then they're fine, even though all three of them, of course, were regarded as, well, deserving of death, which some of them got, didn't they? Anyway, leaving that aside, yes, so we tend to have this viewpoint, especially about the ending of slavery. There is it tends to be taught in primary school, and the basic way that it's taught is that William Wilberforce got up one day and realised that slavery was bad, so he went down for breakfast and had a chat with his housekeeper, and she agreed with him that it probably was bad, so he got himself off on his horse to London or something, and stood up in the House of Commons and said, do you know, I've just realised slavery is bad, and everyone, you know, dropped their canes and their wigs or anything else they were carrying and said, lorks a mercy, yes, you're right, it is bad. So they took a vote and they ended slavery and everyone was happy. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but basically that's how most people remember it, okay? There are some important people, William Wilberforce and British Parliament, and we ended slavery. End of, okay? Except, of course, it's a bit messier than that. So anyway, yesterday there was a bit of a hoo-ha because Sadiq Khan is going to put up a monument in and around the victims of the British slave trade, which of course becomes a very divisive issue, not least of which because it's Sadiq Khan, but we'll come on to that. So we had Colin Brazier, who said this: how about one to the thousands of Royal Navy sailors who perished at sea prosecuting a global ban on slavery inaugurated by Britain, resisted by almost every other nation on earth? Yes, and yes, I mean, okay, fine, we could do that, might be an idea. But you'll notice that we banned slavery. This is the way that this is often presented, which is a very odd view of the history in real terms. Let's come on to everyone's favourite dicky bow tie wearer, Rafe. He's slagging off Sadiq Khan because, of course, Sadiq Khan is the wrong party member and the wrong colour and the wrong religion. One has the feeling that if he was a Tory mayor of London who was a Hindu, it'd be absolutely fine. But he isn't. Anyway, let's just see what he says here down at the bottom. Britain spent 2% of its GDP, a sum equivalent to the entire modern defence budget, on the West Africa Squadron. The death toll amongst British sailors was huge. It is perhaps the first time in history that a nation made itself poorer in the pursuit of a moral objective. That is worth commemorating. Okay, but again, that superficial view, which effectively disentangles a number of different things for the sake of a narrative argument, okay? So we are led to believe that for some reason, in a unique moral point of Britain's history, we decided to implement a ban on slavery across the world. No, we didn't. What we did was having problems, if you like, with slavery in terms of keeping down slave revolts, and having problems in terms of an increasingly militant working class group of people who were also agitating for rights in the north of England, in places like Manchester, for example. We decided collectively, and by we I mean the British state, to do things differently. So we did instigate a crackdown on the slave trade, made illegal in Britain. However, there's a lot of history, links to works down below. You can have a look at this stuff for yourself. If you want to disagree with me, please do, but do read the stuff first, because I've read it. You can have to as well. Anyway, so yeah, British slavers still set off from Bristol because the government had no way of actually knowing whether or not they were slavers. Even when they had manacles on board, it wasn't given as a truth that those people were going to be involved in slavery. It was incredibly lucrative for a lot of people, don't forget. So anyway, the British government had basically worked extremely well with British business interests and put the Royal Navy at their disposal. So if we decided not to do the slave trade anymore, we'd be quite keen on other people not doing it either, to maintain our dominance in the North Atlantic. You can look at things like the Navigation Acts, and that's what we did. But the actual banning of slavery comes quite a bit later, or very much later into Victoria's reign. And even then, if you look at the actual history, you realise that in certain aspects of the British Empire, we were still rip-roaring with slavery into the 1880s, even past the American Civil War. So the nature of morality is one thing. There was certainly a big moral push, because there was a moral push for everybody's civil rights in and around that. And it was quite a rebellious time. Don't forget, the 1830s and the 1840s were particular rebellious times across Europe, with a newly how can I put it? A newly uppity industrial working class. Think 1848. Yeah, these people in many ways had to be pacified, and one of the ways that they were pacified was by giving them new rights, and it was quite hard to do that whilst ignoring other inequalities elsewhere. Yeah. So, for example, if we think about the American Civil War in terms of how uniquely moral Britain was, Britain, in terms of the state, in terms of the state representing business interests, was very, very much in favour of the South. Why? Because we relied on southern slaves to produce cheap cotton for the mills of Manchester. And there was a major issue during that war when people were very, very worried that vast numbers of unemployed Manchester mill workers would get very revolutionary. That is one of the reasons why we completely revived the cotton industry in India, which we'd earlier decimated because we didn't need it. Britain wasn't uniquely moral in what it did. A British state that was heavily invested in maintaining the status quo between keeping the uppity workers at bay and maintaining the vast profits that were accruing to people because of the ongoing exploitation of people in other parts of the world. You can think about this as part of that global system that there is in terms of moving different modes of production and different forms of exploitation to different parts of the planet as and when it becomes economically viable to do so. So you end up with British workers getting better conditions at the expense of other people elsewhere, a story we are still seeing today. Anyway, yes, do have a look at the things down below. Do read them, please do. Please do disagree with me if you want to. Don't send me a PragerU video, whatever you do, because I will laugh at you because you're a child. But at least have an adult to think about this, right? Britain does things which may be seen as being moral, granted, but states don't do things because they're moral. Sometimes those things are the right thing to do and they are caving in to a demand at home rather than anything else. Yes, the British didn't go to India to stop the Indians from burning their wives when they died. It wasn't the reason we were there. Anyway, do have a lovely day if you can do. Stay, well, presumably you'll be dry today, but enjoy it if you can. The summer is decidedly coming to an end. I'm not quite sure if that's a metaphor. Do enjoy.